Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I know that many of you are very regular for our Shabbat morning services. Excellent. But I know that because of distance, Friday night is not always as easy for you to come to. So I'm going to take you through Friday night and show you how that service works so that you're more familiar with it and understand why it works the way it does. Because there are some very important and very beautiful ideas in the Friday night service that you can do even at home, even if you're not here at the synagogue. So we're going to go through the Siddur, and I'll give you a little history, give you a little meaning. I'll sing a little bit here and there, just to get the feel for it. Good? Yeah. Okay. So, welcoming Shabbat. On Friday night, the service is basically divided into three main pieces with one intermission, with one little break. So we have what is officially Kabbalat Shabbat, which literally means the welcoming of Shabbat, the greeting of Shabbat. Then there is a study that is customary, tradition, not required. And then we have Mariv, which is the evening service, which we would do any night, but with changes because of Shabbat. And then we have the concluding passages, some of the things we do after the main part of the service. So that's the basic structure. Now, it gets a little complicated sometimes when talking to people, because sometimes people will call Friday night, the whole Friday night, Kabbalat Shabbat. But technically, if we're going to be really, really careful, Kabbalat Shabbat is part of the Friday night service. And it's the part at the beginning, technically, again, before Shabbat begins. Because the idea is that you are greeting Shabbat as Shabbat comes in. And so that's why it's called Kabbalat Shabbat, the greeting of Shabbat. So let's go ahead and take a look at that part first. So the idea of welcoming Shabbat is, of course, very ancient. We've talked before about lighting the candles and saying Kiddush and things like that as part of our home ritual. But the idea of Kabbalat Shabbat as a special service is something that began in the late Middle Ages. So that means it's only 500 years old. It's really, really new for Judaism. And the idea was to add new poems or new rituals that would transition us towards the regular service. If you were there for the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, for Erev Shavuot, when we were all together with the community at Ohev Shalom, you would have noticed we began with Baruch Hu. If you've ever been to an evening service for Shiva or any other reasons, we start with Baruch Hu. It's bam, we jump right into it. On Friday, the sages of the Middle Ages, the rabbis at those times said, we need to ease into Friday night. We need to slide towards Shabbat, not just jump from work to Shabbat. We need to glide there. We need something to help move us there, to make our spirit change. Because during the day, we're working, and now we're stopping, and our spirit is supposed to change, but it's very hard to get even if you stop your hands, drop your pencil, drop your knife, that's easy, but dropping all the thoughts of the week, that's much harder. So this was a ceremony that was helping us to make that transition. Make sense? Good. So the current structure of Kabbalat Shabbat, because it has changed over the centuries, different communities have different customs, but the current custom in our congregation and many Ashkenazic congregations looks like this. Many will include Shalom Aleichem, although I'll explain that that's not an official part of Kabbalat Shabbat. Yedid Nefesh, Psalms 95 through 99, Psalm 29, Lecha Dodi, which is a poem that we usually sing, and then Psalms 92 through 93. And I'm going to go through why we do those as we go. So, page 5, if you're in the Lev Shalem Siddur. So as you're going to see, this section of the Siddur is not officially Kabbalat Shabbat. That's because Shalom Aleichem is originally sung as part of the welcoming home ceremony. Classical Judaism You would go to synagogue as soon as the sun was getting close to the horizon. You would do the preliminary prayers and Kabbalat Shabbat, and then it would be Mariv. Maybe you needed to study to make the time go a bit longer, so it was dark. And then you would walk home from services just after dark, and then you would have dinner. So that part of walking home and walking back into your house, now that you have begun Shabbat, and then seeing, that your dinner is ready and everybody is smiling and everyone is happy and the house is in good shape, that was where Shalom Aleichem was originally sung. That as you were walking back from the synagogue, you'd be thinking, I'm coming home to a beautiful Shabbat experience. Now, why does that timing work? Well, because in the Talmud on Shabbat, 119b, there's a kind of little story. The idea being that as you walk home, there are angels that are with you. And there's one angel that is going, yay, for good things, and another angel that's going, yay, for bad things. We'll come back to that in a second. And when you get home, if the Shabbat is beautiful and everything is ready, the good angel says, I bless this Shabbat and hope it will be like this next week. And the angel for bad stuff goes, Amen. And if it's all terrible and nothing is ready and everyone is angry, then the bad angel goes, aha, I hope it'll be like this next week. And the good angel has to say, Amen. So as we're walking in, we're saying Shalom Aleichem, right? The phrase Malachei Hasharet, right? Peace be to you, the angels of service, right? So we are actually singing to those angels that are with us as Shabbat begins. And we're basically saying, hi, guys. Notice how good Shabbat is. Hear me singing Shabbat. Notice that our Shabbat is wonderful. That's kind of the feeling that's happening here. So a little bit more of the underlying philosophy and spirituality of Shabbat for Shalom Aleichem, however. It's not that there are bad angels, right? Because God doesn't make bad angels. There's no angel out there going, ha, 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 let's ruin Shabbat. That's not the way that Judaism believes that angels are. But there are patterns of action in the world that God creates. And some of them lead us easily towards more good things. And some of us lead us easily towards bad things, right? It's what we call, bad habits and bad entropy. If you're not ready this week, then you're going to have a bad attitude. And then that means Shabbat's not going to feel as good. And that means next week is going to feel lousy. And that means by the time next Shabbat comes, it's going to be harder to make the next Shabbat. And then if the next Shabbat is lousy, then that means the Shabbat's not going to help you. And then the next week you're going to feel even worse. And the next Shabbat's going to be even harder. And eventually it's like you're not even doing Shabbat. Someone else there? What's that? Car came by?
Car passed by, yeah, but I don't know if it's, I didn't recognize the car. So.
Okay. Maybe someone saw the ad. You left the door open? Okay, well, we'll take care of it, I'm sure. So the idea being that if you make Shabbat good, then the goodness you put into Shabbat will make next week easier. And if you make Shabbat bad, the badness you put into Shabbat will make the next Shabbat harder. Anyone?
No.
Maybe they're just making a U-turn. Okay, so there are a couple of different melodies that go for Shalom Aleichem. There is sort of the classic melody that most people use, which goes like this. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Or you can sing the same melody, but a little bit peppier. So you can go, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. You can modify it. Or you can sing some of the other melodies that are out there, like Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Hamelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then it goes on and on. So this should be a song that moves you. And if you need to move gently, move gently. If you need to move with excitement, move with excitement. But technically, like I said, this is something that is just about recognizing that what we put into Shabbat is what we get out of Shabbat. right? Shabbat is not just for us to sit there and go, okay, God, make me feel good. Right? You have to engage. You have to be trying to make Shabbat special for Shabbat to feel special. Okay, which brings us now to page 10, to the beautiful poem Yedid Nefesh, which means the beloved of my soul. This was written by Rabbi Eliezer Azikri back in around the 1500s. And this is all written in poetry that is linking us to God through longing and love. It's really a love letter, as though you imagine your beloved was living across the ocean and you were writing a letter of how much you miss her and you want her to come back, except this is written as really us being the woman, longing for our reunion with our beloved, which of course is God. And this is again meant to put us in the frame of mind that our Shabbat experience is supposed to be a special, like little honeymoon, mini vacation between us and God, so that we can have that intimacy that maybe during the week we've been too busy to enjoy. A little bit of interesting history on Yedid Nefesh. There are many different versions of it that you'll find in other Sidurim. The version in this Sidur and a few others is the actual copy that was written by the original rabbi's own handwriting in his own notebook. So this is definitely what he wrote, and other people made some edits over the years. So one of the most famous is in the second paragraph. It finishes off with, in English it says, your servant forever. But in Hebrew, the word is shivchat olam, which means your eternal female servant, almost like a concubine, like your lover. And I guess some people consider that a little too woo, and so they edited that. But this is the original phrasing that the original author used. Again, there are different melodies. I'm only going to sing you part of one of the more common ones, and it goes like this. Yedid nefesh av harachaman meshoch avdach eretzonach yarutz avdach kemo hayam yishtachavemu adarav yerav lo yedidutach minoch etzuf vechol ta'am. And then continues through the other stanzas. As you can hear, the melody that was chosen, that's the most common melody, is one of like heartbreak and longing of just, I wish I could be together with you. And of course, in a few minutes, we will be together, because that's when Shabbat will be coming. Any questions? Good. Okay. Then we begin a series, starting on page 11, of Psalms. This is a series of 5 Psalms, too many S sounds. And these 5 Psalms were added a few years later, after the Kabbalat Shabbat movement began, as what we would call sort of the very late medieval, the very early modern times, depends on which community you were in. But this section of the book of Psalms, between Psalm 95 and 99, all of them have a couple things in common. They all speak of singing or rejoicing at God. They all speak of praising and celebrating God. And they all have some connection to God ruling the world through the symbol of creation and through the symbol of God's justice. So these really set the scene for us to appreciate Shabbat for what it is, which is what we're going to see when we finally reach the Psalm for Shabbat, which is Psalm 92. Which is that the whole world has been created in a very special way. Now, the number 5 is going to work out to be very important, because let me back up here because it's easier to point. If you add in the 5 Psalms that are here, plus Psalm 29, we get 5 plus 1. 6, right? How many days of active creation were there? 6. Plus Psalm 92, which is the psalm for Shabbat. So we get 6 days plus Shabbat, and that makes the 7th day, exactly. So by the number of psalms, we end up exactly on the Shabbat psalm after the right number of psalms. And then we'll talk about Psalm 93 when we get there, because it's kind of added on. And Lecha Dodi, of course, is its own poem. It's not a psalm. Okay, so these psalms from 95 onward, usually they have different pieces of them that can be sung. Sometimes people will sing the whole psalms. It's more common for people to sing pieces of the psalms. So, for example, on Psalm 95, the first 4 lines often get sung. That goes like this: Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai. Naria, naria, letzu yishenu, nekadma panav betoda. Naria, naria, yetzu yishenu, bizmirot naria lo. And then usually we repeat the opening again. So as you can see, the melody matches the theme. Lechu neranena, come and sing, come and rejoice, come and make a glad sound. So the melody is very, very upbeat. But in the sanctuary, there will also usually be time for each person to recite these privately. So we do parts together in song, parts together with the leader, and parts that are done privately as we go through this cycle. Because it's not just about singing as a group, it's also about trying to move yourself. And since each person is a little different, we need to have that time as well. On page 13 and 14, we get Psalm 96. There is a very popular melody for singing the whole of this psalm, so that's something you'll hear quite often, which goes Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz, and then onwards and onwards. But lots of other people also enjoy singing near the end on page 14, which is where the little red arrow is, which is called Yismechu. And that usually gets sung like this: Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, Betagel haaretz, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Umelo, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Umelo, and you can repeat that as many times as you like. Right. So, as you can see, I mean, again, it's another upbeat and nice, strong type of melody, and all of this is meant to help us move. So we're going really in a 6-step process to try and move us in stages towards that celebration of Shabbat. And each one of these is reminding us, as though it was a mentioning of each day of creation, you know, thinking back to Sunday for the first one, thinking back to Monday for the second one, right? What was that day? Maybe that day seemed hard. Maybe that day seemed to be like away from God, or it seemed to be terrible, or maybe this wasn't what, and each one we say, no, no, no. God is in the world. God wants the world to be beautiful. God wants the world to be just. That day may have been rotten, but that doesn't mean creation's bad. That day may have been unjust. That doesn't mean God is unjust. And when we get to Shabbat, that's when we can see it clearly, that all the stuff that messes up life, on Shabbat, we move that smoke away. So the melodies try to bring us there as well. Page 15 and 16 are Psalm 97. One of the more common songs for this one is on page 16 for the 4th and 3rd to the last lines, which is Or Zarua, which literally means there is a light that has been sown, like a seed planted in the ground. There's been light planted that will grow for the righteous and the ones that are of upright character, you know, that are good people. And that usually, again, in the punchy melody goes, Or Zarua la tzadik urishtei lev simcha, Or Zarua la tzadik urishtei lev simcha, Ozaru al tzadik u'rishlelev simcha, u'rishlelev simcha. Ozaru al tzadik u'rishlelev simcha, u'rishlelev simcha. And continues as you like to. That is the common one for that one. Now, for Psalm number 98, I haven't found a good melody that most people know for this yet. So this is one that we usually do either in the Hebrew or the English. One thing I should also point out is you'll notice in this Siddur that there are little selections from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, in the left-hand margin. That's because many communities, especially the Sephardic ones, have a custom of saying Shir HaShirim, the love poem between man and woman, as well as between God and Israel, each Friday afternoon. So that's why the Siddur includes a few of the passages. And those are also very helpful for thinking about during this time. Psalm number 99, our fifth psalm in this cycle. The most popular section to sing are the last 3 lines on page 20, which is usually called just Romemu. And that usually is sung, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. And you can repeat that one as well. It's nice when you have something that's a little short because it gives you a chance to go over it a few times. So at least you've got the right feeling, hopefully by the last one, maybe even by the first one. But it's easier to keep hold of rather than chasing after words that it's hard to keep up with. Now, like I said, that then brings us not to Psalm 100, but instead to Psalm 29. Now, Psalm 29 is a very specially written poem. It's a very tight type of poetry. So there's a lot of things that are happening here. One of them is, of course, that we are giving praise to God, but we're mentioning in it through a very interesting metaphor. We're talking about Kol Adonai, the voice of Adonai, or the sound of Adonai. Right? Kol can mean like a voice, or kol can mean like kol shofar, the sound of the shofar. So it's both voice or noise. And we're talking about Kol Adonai, the voice of God is seen in different parts of the world, in different parts of creation. And that phrase, Kol Adonai, the sound of Adonai, comes 7 times in this psalm. Now, I don't think that was an accident. I think that the author was being very careful for that the 7 times, represents the wholeness of creation, the 7 days of creation. And the phrase Adonai itself, God's name, comes 18 times in this psalm, which is surprising because it's a rather short psalm. But of course, 18 in Hebrew means chai, which means life. So the idea that God is in all parts of life and that God is, of course, the source of life is what we see as the capstone of creation, day 6 of the active creation portion. And all of that is very neatly tucked into this psalm, but it would be easy to miss if you weren't thinking about it in advance. Right? It's a nice poem, but if you're not looking at it very carefully, sometimes you miss the meaning that's in there. I'm not going to sing all of it because it takes a little longer to sing, but the most common Friday night melody goes like this: Mizmor LeDavid, Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim. Havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shmo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. O l'Adonai al ha'mayim el hakavod him, Adonai al mayim rabim. Now, if you want, I should point it out at the beginning. Sorry, I didn't. If you would like to hear all of these sung in completeness and in a better voice than mine, on our website, we have a full set of recordings for the entire service, Friday night and Shabbat morning. sung by Debbie Mighton. And you can just go through their little MP3 files. You can download them or listen to them on the website. It's called Audio of Services. And then you can listen to them and learn them to your heart's content. It'll be better than any YouTube copy of me. Okay. Which now gets us to one of the earliest parts of Kabbalat Shabbat. Earliest, I mean by one of the first written. Page 23, Lachadodi. Lachadodi was written in around the 1500s by Shlomo Alkabetz. We know it was written by Shlomo Alkabetz, even though for many other poems we're not 100% sure. But we know that he wrote this because his name is in the song. If you take the first letter of each of the stanzas, it spells out his name. So it'd be like me writing a song where the first part is with a J, and the next part's with an O, and the next part is with an S, and the next part is with an H, and you go, Joshua. That's what he did. He wrote his name into the poem. So there's no way that we have to worry about who wrote this. We know who wrote this. Now, Lachadodi was one of many poems that was being written in this time period. It was incredible creativity and beautiful artistry, but Lachadodi became sort of the ultimate favorite of everybody around the Jewish world, not only in Tzfat, where he originally wrote this. And one of the reasons he did it is because his poetry so beautifully connects the ideas of Shabbat and the idea of redemption and the idea of the Sabbath bride coming towards us, that we are almost like getting married or witnessing a wedding. And he does it all with the language of the prophets and the language of Tanakh and the metaphor of the Bible. And he uses a lot of quotes, for example, from Isaiah. And so it really fits a beautiful tapestry of ideas. Sorry, it fits a beautiful tapestry of ideas. I thought I had that on mute. I do have it on mute. Okay. A beautiful tapestry of ideas together very, very nicely. Again, there's many different ways to sing this. In fact, Lachadodi is probably only second to Adon Olam for the number of melodies that are out there. But Lachadodi has just so many different beautiful ways. If you go to YouTube and type Lachadodi, you'll find lots and lots of different versions. Perhaps the most common sort of goes like this. Lechadodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavla. Lechadodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavla. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmihanu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem ol tiferet v'litila. And then it continues. Now, you'll notice that for this section of Lachadodi, even though it's only a 9 stanza poem, it's written on 3 pages in the Siddur. That's because of the commentary. To really get the most out of Lachadodi, you have to read the notes. Like I said, Shlomo Alkabetz used so many different references to ideas in the Bible and ideas in the rabbinic literature and ideas in Kabbalah that you need an explanation of what his poem was all about to get the most out of it. So you've got to read in the margins to figure out what's happening here to really get the most. So we continue then to the end of Lachadodi, and we get to page 25, where we do Boi v'shalom ateret bala, come in peace, the crown of your husband. And this stanza, it is customary for the congregation to stand up and to turn towards the entrance. And it's basically trying to say we are greeting Shabbat as though Shabbat was walking in to the room with us. Right? It's almost like you have to visualize Shabbat as a bride coming down the aisle, coming into the room and joining us for this celebration. Now, hopefully, I'm speaking to married couples, hopefully you guys all remember that feeling of excitement of the wedding, of seeing that beloved person as you came close to them, and that feeling of it's really happening and I'm really getting married to the person I love. That's why he uses this imagery. It's because for most people, for most of history, the wedding day was the memory of the happiest moment they had. And so by going back to the idea of a wedding, it was a really good way to awaken in people the right kind of emotion that we should have. We shouldn't be going, oh man, Shabbat. It should be Shabbat, grabbing Shabbat with a hug. And that's why he uses this whole metaphor. Okay, which brings us finally on page 27 to Psalm 92, which is the Psalm of Shabbat, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. Now, the really weird thing is, this psalm never mentions Shabbat except for the title. It says, this is a psalm about Shabbat. And then there's nothing about Shabbat in the actual rest of Psalm 92. But there is, of course, right? Which is not the word Shabbat, but the idea of Shabbat. Because the rest of the psalm reflects the ultimate goal of the world, right? That, yes, we see bad people, they come up, they do bad stuff, they're a problem, but in the long run, they will wither. Just like grass or weeds, they come up fast and they go away fast. Whereas trees, which is what the psalm uses to refer to the righteous people as, trees, they grow slowly, right? The grass is like up and down, and the tree is just still growing. And the grass is up and down, the trees just still growing. That's the wicked, up and down. The righteous just keep slowly, strongly continuing. And the idea here is that is what we are supposed to reflect and remember on Shabbat. That Shabbat is supposed to be like a taste of the peace where there won't be any up and down of the wicked. It'll only be the forest of the righteous. The world will be in a perfect balance and a perfect state. And Shabbat is supposed to give us a chance to taste that by removing all of the other problems and distractions that we have during the week. So this is really meant to give us that strength and that vision. Make sense? Okay. A couple of different parts of this get sung. The beginning part gets sung very often, which goes, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, Ulzamer l'Shimcha Elyon, Ulzamer l'Shimcha Elyon, Lehagid baboker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, Alei asor v'alei navel alei higayon bechinor. Back to the beginning, and then we sing through it a little bit more. So that's sort of the opening one that's most commonly done. For the conclusion, which is, as I said, about the righteous being compared to the trees on page 28, where the arrow is, it's a section called Sadik Katamar. The righteous are like the palm tree, the date palm tree. And they are like the Erev Balvanon, they are like the cedars that live in the forests of Lebanon. There's a couple different melodies for this. There is the Israeli dance melody, which goes Sadik Katamar Yifrach Yifrach, Sadik Katamar Yifrach. Very nice, very peppy. And then there's more of a optimistic but slow version. Sadik Katamar Yifrach. If you sing it slowly enough, you can actually watch the trees grow. But you can also sing it a little bit faster than that, right? Once you know the words in the melody, you can speed it up and go, Sadik Katama Yifrach, Eres Balvanon Yisgei, and so on. Which then brings us to the end of the official Kabbalat Shabbat cycle, which is Psalm 93 on page number 29. So Psalm 93 really is very, very neatly rounds out the message of Psalm 92. Because the imagery in Psalm 93 is the image of the rivers and the oceans and the waves crashing and pounding. And above all of it is God. And that's really the synopsis of everything that we've got here, right? From all the way at the beginning of the first 6 days and everything that we saw, of the grass and the weeds and the tree, is there's this feeling that during the week we're running, the waves, the river, the water, the crashing, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But really above all of that, it's not chaos. There is stability. The world is firm, God is constant, and the world is heading in the right direction. And that is what Psalm 93 comes to do. So we can go, And because we know that, because we know the world is firm, because we know that God is constant, for this one day, I can put down my hammer. Right? I don't need to work today because I know God has it. Monday or Sunday, I've got to work. But for today I can let God take care of it. I know that the world is firm, right? The world is not going to be shaken. It's not going to fall over. It'll be okay for a day. I can enjoy Shabbat. And with that, we're ready for Shabbat itself. Now, depending upon where you are, sometimes you're a bit early. That is to say, you finish Kabbalat Shabbat and the sun is, just checking to see if that's someone listening, and the sun is still up in the sky. Someone mentioned about Eshet Chayil as part of the Erev Shabbat. And yes, Eshet Chayil is indeed part of Erev Shabbat, but it is part of the home service for Shabbat. And I think I may have mentioned that when we did go through the home service, where we do lighting candles and Kiddush and Motzi and all of that. So yes, Eshet Chayil. Yes, I know it's you, Jasmine. So Eshet Chayil is part of the home service for Shabbat. But it's not customarily done, at least in the synagogues I've been part of, during the service in the synagogue. So yeah, we do Eshet Chayil in my house. And if you haven't ever done Eshet Chayil, which is the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, which is a praise of the ideal woman, husbands, this is a great way to remind yourself each week of how lucky you are to be married to the person you're with. And for both of us, both men and women, Eshet Chayil is also mystically linked to our celebration of Torah and the gift of Torah in our life, as though Torah is the representing of the ideal woman, of wisdom itself, as though wisdom was a person. So thank you for the reminder, Jasmine. But yes, that's a home part of the ritual rather than a sanctuary part of the ritual. But like I said, sometimes you look up and you finish Kabbalat Shabbat and the sun is still in the sky or on the edge of the horizon, so it's not time yet for the Mariv service, for the evening service. Thank you. You're welcome. Instead, what we would do is we would have a short study session. And if you look on the next page, page 31, you'll see that there's a section taken from Mishnah Shabbat 2:1, which specifically talks about what you can use to light the Shabbat lights. This was a reminder, of course, that they needed to be lit and they had to be lit correctly. But it also gave us a chance to reflect on why we have these lights and how these lights work for us. This particular Siddur also offers other texts to think about and study. When you're in the sanctuary, we usually have the schedule a little bit more correct, so we don't need to worry about a gap. But this is also the time where, for example, I will do a sermon as a chance to study before we begin our Mariv service. Make sense? Okay. And we now turn to page 39. So for page 39, we begin officially what is the actual obligation part of the service. Everything that we did before is now very strong custom, but it didn't exist 1,000 years ago. I mean, the Psalms existed, but nobody said them before Shabbat. That wasn't any official practice. But this, Mariv, this has been our practice for at least 2,000 years for any evening service, whether it's Friday night or whether it's Tuesday night. It's just on Friday night, we now put more of a preliminary, more of an introduction to warm ourselves up before we get to it. I did also point out, Mariv sometimes is also known as Arvit, and it's also known as the evening service, if you're in English. So if someone says, what time is Arvit? They're talking about the evening service. They're talking about Mariv. They're synonyms for each other. So it begins as every evening service does, which is the Baruch Hu. And the Baruch Hu is, of course, an invitation. It is a call to everyone else to come and worship together. And that's why there is a leader part and a congregation part. By the way, you'll notice in this particular Siddur, there is a little symbol, right? A little loopy symbol with a little thing at the bottom. That's telling you where we bow. Whenever you see that, that's a section where the congregation will bow. But for this, there's a call, and then a response, and then the leader repeats. So the leader is going to bow first, and then everyone else is going to bow when they respond, and then the leader is going to bow second when he or she repeats what the congregation just said. So just so we've got that choreography down, I'll do both parts, right? So I'll be leader, and then I'll sort of move so you can tell when I'm the other. And you'll also notice there's a different melody for Baruch Hu depending upon which day it is. Friday night, there's a different melody than Saturday morning. And Sunday morning, there's a different melody than you would get on Friday. And that way we get a different feel for the service by the melodies that we have. It's kind of a way to key us into the right mood. As you'll see, the Baruch Hu for Friday night has a very gentle and warm and almost like a lullaby kind of feeling. It goes like this. Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach. And the congregation says, Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam vahed. And then the leader says it again, Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam vahed. So you can hear that melody is is very different than the melodies you'll get, da 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 da, which is sort of a weekday melody for the Baruch Hu. This one we're taking our time, right? This one's not all business. This one is enjoying the moment together. And of course, as I think I've taught you before, the Baruch Hu has an invitation, and then it's being fulfilled by the congregation. But then the leader has to also fulfill the invitation. The leader says, "Bless God," and so everybody blesses God. And then the leader has to also bless God because, you can't tell someone else to do something if you're not going to do it too. Then we continue on with Ma'ariva Ravim, which is the standard blessing we do in the evening, which talks, of course, about creation, but it focuses on the gift of darkness as well as the gift of light. In the morning, when we say Yotzer Or, we're talking only really about light, but here we're really looking at the cycle of night and day and of all the seasons. And we're thanking God and recognizing that there aren't two gods, one God of light, one God of dark. There's only one God. And the same God made night who made daytime. And when we are looking at nighttime, we should feel connected to God just as much as we feel connected to God during the day. And the same thing for spring or for winter or for summer. It's not like a different God has each season. It's one God that's taking care of the whole cycle. And then, again, just to give you a feel for that Friday night melody, when we finish at the bottom of the page, it'll sound a little like this. Uma'avir yom u'mehevi layla, umavdil ben yom u'vein layla, Adonai tziva'ot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamidim lo chaleinu le'olam vahed, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariva Ravim. So you can hear how that melody is very gentle, very inviting. Now, we're going to skip page 39b. That's an alternative version of that prayer that's based off another manuscript, but not one that is commonly used. Still very interesting historically, and you're welcome to use it as it is part of our tradition, but it's not the one that is most usually used. Page 40, we then move, just as we would in the morning, to a blessing about the gift of God's love, the gift of Torah. In the evening, we call that blessing Ahavat Olam. And again, this is usually sung, and again, to a very beautiful and inviting melody. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, and so on and so forth. But you'll notice that it follows up, just like in the morning as well, with Kriyat HaShema, which is the Shema and its following paragraphs, which are meant to lead us to understand God and thus to reciprocate the love that God just told us. Right? God tells us that He loves us in Ahavat Olam. By the end, after the Shema, we have understood God, and now we are saying we love God. And then the rest of Kriyat HaShema talks about the partnership between us and God, of making the world right, which, as we continue to move, page 41 and page 42, brings us down to Emet Ve'emunah, which is the next block of blessings, or a blessing rather, that starts at the very, very bottom of page 42 with the word Emet and continues on 43 with Ve'emunah. And this blessing, just like Emet Ve'yatziv in the morning, talks about the power of God's redemption, of what God has done in the past, taking us out of Egypt, and what will happen in the future. But notice again, the very tight structure that we have here. We start with creation, and then we find our place in creation because of Torah. And through Torah, we come to understand God and that relationship. And if you add all of that together, you get redemption, right? That is what makes the cycle of redemption happen, is us understanding God through Torah and putting it into practice in creation. Now the world is the way it's supposed to be. Well, we're getting there. That is at least the plan. And then page 45, we have the Hashkivenu. And I know I said at the beginning that we know that God made dark just like God made light, and so we shouldn't be afraid of the night. Let's be honest, everybody is afraid of the dark. But we're not afraid of the dark because it's not godly. We're afraid of the dark because bad stuff happens in the dark. When I lay down and I go to sleep, I'm vulnerable, right? Somebody could come in and attack me. A bear could eat me in the past. I don't think the bear is going to get into my house, but in the past that was a real danger. And people, the bandits could attack, the armies could attack, and all sorts of problems. So at night you would get very worried. And this was part of the reason why we have Hashkivenu, to say, I'm going to go to bed, I'll be at peace, and I know that God is still in the world, right? Whatever happens, I'm still connected to God. So this is a way to get rid of that sense of danger and fear and allow us to have confidence. Make sense? Okay. Page 46, we have Vishamru. Vishamru is actually just a quote taken from the book of Exodus, chapter 31, 16 to 17. And Wanda, I can see you bouncing with the melody. It's an incredibly great melody. That melody that I think you were doing, the Vishamru, right? That melody is about 40 years old or so. So it's a fairly modern melody, but it's a beautiful and very catchy melody. So it is usually sung, just so people can hear the basic chorus. It goes, Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Right, so berit olam, that's the really important word, because we are saying that Shabbat is part of the Brit Olam, the eternal covenant between us and God. Right? Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael. Between me, says God, and the children of Israel, this will be an ot. This will be a sign of the connection between us. That when we celebrate Shabbat, it is like a wedding ring to indicate that bond between us and God. It is a symbol of our love and our connection, of the covenant. So for Vishamru, we sing it always with a very special passion. Good? Good. The Chatzi Kadesh comes at the end of the evening section with Shema and its blessings, which is different than the morning. In the morning, we don't make a break between the last blessing and the Amidah. That was in order to not only keep our concentration, but also a very pragmatic reason, which was because technically these are two separate sections of service. Sometimes people would do one and pause and forget to do the next. And especially in the morning when people were all about, got to get to work, got to get to work, got to get to work, the rabbi said, no, you don't. You just need to keep going. Don't stop, right? Don't stop. You started, keep going to the Amidah, don't take a break. But for the night, it is more natural to have a Chatzi Kaddish, to say, we finished one section, a little section, and now we're going to do the other section, the Amidah. And so the Chatzi Kaddish gives us just that little transition point between the two pieces. And then, of course, we have the Amidah. The Amidah is between pages 47 and 52. And the Amidah for the nighttime Amidah is always said quietly, individually. right? We don't have a leader leading the Friday night. We have the individual just privately doing it in the sanctuary, all as a group, but all individually. And it has the same opening and the same ending as every other Amidah throughout the rest of the year. The difference is, of course, that middle blessing. And the middle blessing for Friday night really emphasizes not only Shabbat, but also creation as being our main focus. One of the most important texts in the Friday night section is the Vayachulu, which we'll talk about now. Because after the Amidah, on page 53, yes, on 53, just in case you missed Vayachulu in your own Amidah, right? Maybe you didn't remember all the words, maybe you didn't understand. We do the Vayachulu together, and that's on page 53. And Vayachulu is the beginning of chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, the first 3 verses, and it reminds us that Shabbat is part of creation. Right? A lot of people think that God made the world in 6 days, and then Shabbat was just when God stopped working. And that's kind of sort of true, that God set all the laws of the natural world in motion and created the material of the universe in those first 6 days. But the 7th day was also something was also created, and that was Shabbat. And Shabbat was created by not adding additional things to the universe, right? By making room, there was space for Shabbat to happen. And Shabbat wasn't the negation of God's work. Shabbat was the culmination, the capstone, the finale of what God did. That moment of silence was greater than everything that came before. And so Vayachulu reminds us that it isn't 6 days, it's 7 days as one whole unit. Because you don't understand the 6 unless you also understand day number 7. Good? Okay. And then we get something that's a little curious, a little odd. Beginning in the middle of 53 and up until the top of 54, we get the pseudo-repetition. Now, in a regular weekday service, if we have time, or even a regular morning Shabbat service, we will do the Amidah privately, and then the Shaliach Tzibor, the prayer leader, will repeat the whole Amidah out loud, right? In the evening services, weekday or Shabbat, we don't do that. In the weekday service, you do the Amidah yourself and you're done. But on Shabbat, there was a worry. People would be coming home late, maybe because of work, and they'd be getting to synagogue, and they might not be there when we started. And that would mean that when everybody was done, they would all be rushing home for Shabbat dinner. And the poor guy who came late, he's going to be left there just praying alone and then have to walk home all alone, which is not usually a good idea for most of our history. And so what the rabbis did is said, look, let's just do a little review of the Amidah. It's not a repetition, right? Because it's not an official repetition. We don't do a repetition. But we could mention the same ideas of what is in the Amidah. So we'll mention Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. We'll mention the idea that God created this time of Shabbat and God made this Shabbat special for us. So we'll quote the ideas of it, but we'll not actually do an official repetition. And that way, if someone's late, while we're doing this, they can finish up, and then they can skip this, and we can all finish at the same time. And that way, we can all walk back to our homes, down the streets into the village at the same time. So that's where this part of the service came in. And then after Kaddish Shalem, we get to the Kiddush. Now, like Eshet Chayil that we mentioned earlier, the Kiddush is primarily a home ritual. It is something that there are a lot of parts to Erev Shabbat service. How long does it usually take? And is there a time when Temple Israel does this service? So yes, there is a time when Temple Israel does this service. It's called 7:30 p.m. every week. And the length of the service, give or take how long my sermon is usually about an hour. So there are lots of pieces, but it actually goes faster than this because we just move from one piece to the other in a very natural flow. I don't give this much explanation every Friday night. So yes, on average, the service will last from 7:30 to about 8:30. If I give a long sermon, it might be 8:35. If I give a short sermon, it might be 8:25. But that's usually the window. Try not to go on too long. So like I said, the Kiddush is primarily a home ritual, but since many people may not be able to do it at home, or they might be traveling and not have a home locally, it became custom to do the Kiddush in the synagogue as well. And of course, the Kiddush text, if you read it, is a great summary of what Shabbat is all about. It reminds us that Shabbat is the first day that was ever considered holy, and it also reminds us that Shabbat has the theme of freedom and the theme of creation, which of course is echoing what we hear from the Ten Commandments, the version in Exodus and the version in Deuteronomy. And for those that were there at the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, Susan Bernstein did an excellent presentation about how these two ideas come together on Shabbat. And then we get to the end. Yigdal, page 62. I mean, of course, we have the Leinu, and we also, of course, you have to have the holy announcements, right? When they make all the announcements of what's coming up in the synagogue. But those we've talked about before, just like Kaddish Shalem we've talked about before. But Yigdal, I don't think we've talked about. So we did talk about way back at the beginning of our time studying together about Maimonides, Rambam's 13 articles of faith, his 13 principles. It was later turned into a poem, which was then turned in by Daniel Ben Yehuda into a shorter poem that we now can sing. So there's this, one of the most beautiful things in Judaism is that we actually sing philosophy, right? We're singing our learning. So we take these 13 ideas of Rambam and then we turn them into a poem. So there are some different melodies. The most classic melody in the Hebrew goes like this. Yigdal Elohim chai v'yishtabach nimtza v'ein hetel mitziuto echad v'ein yachid keyichudo nelam v'gam ein sof le'achduto. And I have found that you can actually do the same even in the English in this book, right? So you can do glorify and praise the living God who exists but not in time, singular and unique, hidden and unbounded, and so on and so forth. There's a couple places where you gotta squish up some words, but it mostly works. But the idea being that at the end of Shabbat, we should leave with this reminder of our core beliefs that we are supposed to be striving to understand and striving to keep in our view of the world. Now, many people, of course, will also say Yigdal in the morning too, but it does have kind of a very special tradition of being sung for the end of Friday night services. Now, if you don't want to sing Yigdal, there are lots of other songs too that can be sung on Friday night. This one just happens to have sort of the most common tradition. And that is, in about an hour, the standard Friday night service. Questions? What's that?
I said I ask you later.
You can ask me later. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with asking now. Let me just make sure there are no more questions on the phone. Nope. Okay. So with that in mind, like I said, I understand the traffic situations on Fridays and all of that, but try to incorporate this in your home rituals. You know, take a little time to celebrate Shabbat, sing some of the songs of Kabbalat Shabbat. Of course, have time for Mariv and the Amidah, but you'll find that these prayers and the way that it fits together really does help that transition from regular work towards Shabbat much more easily. You know, because sometimes it's a little bit like going from a cold bath into a really warm jacuzzi, and it can be a little shocking to the system. So this is sort of easing your way from the cold, harsh work into a nice, gentle, relaxing bath of Shabbat. Good? Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.